In this video, I'm going to be going over how you create your adventure, your first real Streamlit app step by step and using all of the widgets. And I'm going to be going in a little bit more detail of each of these widgets that we're going to be using. And we're going to continue on from where we left off in class, but I'm going to start from the very beginning for those individuals who were not in class on that day. So first things first, if you are not in class on the day, or if you didn't show up for lab 7, you want to make sure that you click on lab 7 and go to that and look at the video for that. If not, you're going to go ahead and start where I'm at, but we want to make sure that you have a CS120 portfolio folder. And for those of you who, I did tell you this in class, for those of you who weren't in class, if you download this, I have provided a document that I created through using HTML that kind of goes through each of these functions that we're going to go through. So you can always reference it in a little bit shorter hand with examples of when it was used. We're going to get into using the data frame and the line chart and all this extra stuff within this week and also next week as well. So you can always feel free, for those of you who kind of like to try things out on your own. I do have all the instructions in Canvas that you can try it out yourself, but I did provide the code so that we can really focus in on the explanation of the uses of these functions. So you'll want to make sure that you structure it in this way and don't just copy and paste the code, but actually understand what you're doing, because this will help you with project 2. All right, so without further ado, we're going to get right into it, and I'm not going to be referencing Canvas Activity13 as much, but you can have this up on your side screen if you would like. Okay, so now we are actually going to open up Visual Studio Code where our CS120 portfolio is. Again, I'm going to just go ahead and close this folder to help those of you who kind of struggle with navigating through Visual Studio Code. So here I closed it, but you'll see any recent folders that you have here. You'll click on the one that you used, or you can just do File, Open Folder, and find the folder that you want to use. For me, I'm just going to go ahead and click on my recent since I just used it. And you always want to make sure that you open up the CS120 portfolio, not a module, but the full portfolio. Now that you've opened it here, again, you're going to have to make sure that the first thing you do is activate your virtual environment. And in order to do that here, you'll have to open your terminal. So I'll pretend like I don't have a terminal and show it to you from the start. So here we're going to click on the 3 dots at the top. And then we're going to click on Terminal, New Terminal. And what should pop up here is my venv. Because it's already activated, I'm going to deactivate it to show you how to activate it. So if you already have this green dot here, you're just going to type in deactivate to deactivate it if you don't want to use it anymore, and that will go away. Now, in order to activate it, again, in the last video, I just expressed that you would want to, if you know you're not going to remember the command, create a text file. So you're going to click on that and just create a simple text file here. So I'm going to say delete me.txt. And in this case, this is where you would want to actually place your information. But I did create a command to run .txt file to have the Windows, the Mac, and also the Linux system activation code in there. So here what we're going to do is just for Windows, which is what I'm on, type in venv, which is the name of my virtual environment, /scripts/activate. So now my virtual environment is activated. I can now add in the file that I need, and for this one, we want to actually create it called class Activity13. But again, if you remember what I told you in the past, was that in order for us to actually run Streamlit inside of the way that I have it structured in the module folder, I need to first check to see where it is. You'll notice Lab 7 doesn't show up here, but we do have test pi because it is inside of the CS120 portfolio, not inside of module 10. So if you're someone that prefers to just have all of your files inside of here and not do it in, folder-based system, then you can do that and you will see your file here and you can just run it directly from this section. But if you are someone that's like me, where you like to have things a little bit more sectioned off, like module 10, so you can reference it back later on in a little bit more organized way, what you're going to do is now change the directory. We're in CS120 portfolio video folder, but we want to be inside of module 10. And again, like I mentioned in the last video, when you create these folders, there should not be a space in between them. You can either make it one word or use an underline, but it needs to be have a better naming convention so that you can actually use the path name here. So now I'm going to go ahead and change my directory path. I want to go into module 10 so that I can run my Streamlit app here. So I'm going to do CD space and paste that module 10. And now I've changed my directory and I moved inside of my folder module 10 down here. So when I type in ls, I'll see, okay, lab 7. So now I know that I'm in the right folder for this specific module. Now I'm going to click on that module and I'm going to now create a new file. And this one is going to be class activity13.py. So you want to make sure you have that .py for the Python extension here. Now we've created our file here. And when we type in ls, we see that file is here. And obviously the length is going to be 0 because we have nothing inside of there. But now we're going to do import Streamlit as st for our shorthand version to be able to access the Streamlit function, so we don't have to keep on writing streamlit.title, streamlit.caption. We could just do st. Again, when we type in ls, you'll see that the length has changed. It's now 26 because we have something in there. All right. So now we can get directly into class activity 13 now that I've explained this process again from the last video. Hopefully you're caught up. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. And I'm going to minimize this terminal here. Now, the first thing that we need to do in the instructions is we first want to do our import. So we're going to import at the top of our code the 3 different things that we're going to be accessing. So the first thing I did was obviously import Streamlit so that I can use Streamlit. The next thing I'm going to do is import JSON because we're going to be using a JSON file. And then the very last thing is importing time. And that's just so we can create a little bit of time delay. So the JSON is just going to be what we're using in this case to convert data like our dictionaries to and from a JSON file. And hopefully you kind of remember this a little bit when we did file reading and writing last week. But then now we're going to do time. So this is going to let us pause the program briefly to kind of simulate loading an animation or loading or an animation, which you'll get down to later on. So now the first thing we're going to do, now that we've done our imports, is we're just going to have our app title and our app caption. So the first thing here we're going to have is st.title. Now this st.title, again, is just going to display a large page text. Now what we're going to have in here is just a kind of cool gameplay information. So I'm just going to click on Windows and my period symbol to be able to access the emoji. For Linux, it's going to be that launcher, the little circle thing, plus shift and space, and you'll be able to open it up. So now inside of this title here, what we're going to do is just place a title saying Streamlit Adventure Dashboard. And we're going to have JSON and save system as well. So that's going to be what we kind of focus on in this specific section. Now, the next thing we're going to do is use our title and our caption. So the st.caption allows for a little bit of a lower subtitle. It's a smaller subtitle section. It gives us a bit of a description below the title. So we know that the Streamlit adventure is going to be bold and big, but the caption is a little bit smaller and just below that. And we're going to say build your adventurer, save your progress, and load it anytime. Explanation point. So now that we have this section here, I'm going to save that. Now we're going to move on to our actual task here. So we're going to move on to task 1, which is character creation. Now, inside of this, what we're going to do is we're going to create input widgets that let the players build their own adventurer. So the first thing we're going to do is st.header. And this st.header here is just going to be what we see in each section. So I'm going to just have some, let's say, wizard. I'm going to click on this guy here. And then now we have our little wizard person, and we're going to say task 1, create your adventurer. So that's going to be the header that we see. This is going to create a bold section header in our Streamlit app. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we want to be able to get information from the user. So we're going to use their input widget, Streamlit's input widget. So we're going to ask the player to type text like their name. So in this case here, like I mentioned, because it returns a value, we're going to store it in a variable called name. So we're going to assign to that variable name whatever gets returned from our Streamlit.text input function here. Now, inside of that text input function, again, in the last video, I showed you, you can actually have a label here where it's just going to say name right above it. It's completely up to you if you want to have that, but you don't need to include it. But I'm going to say enter your adventurer's name, colon. And whatever the user enters in will get returned and stored into that variable. Now, the next thing we're going to use is called st.selectbox. And we're going to just pretty much allow for the user to select and choose the region that they want to go to. So we're going to do region equals, so we're going to use region as a variable, and we're going to do st.selectbox, open, close, curly braces. Now, inside of this select box here, just want quotes here. I'm just going to put a globe here to indicate that I wanted to select a region. And I'm just going to say choose your region, colon. And then afterwards, I'm just going to have a comma, and I'm going to have a list of string items in this of the regions that they can choose from. And this is going to drop down a box of items that they can choose from. So the first one, they can choose a forest. The second one, they can choose a desert. The third one, an ocean. Fourth one, mountains. And then the very last one, sky cities. Again, you don't have to do the exact same thing I'm doing, but in terms of the items that you place in here, you can be creative if you'd like, but this is the items that I'm going to have. So these are the choices that the adventurer can choose. Now, the next step that we're going to use is our slider. And this is going to be for the power. So we're going to allow the user to set their power level. And we're going to store it in a variable called power. All right, so we're going to do st.slider to access the slider function. And this is going to give us like a line that's going to go across. It's going to allow the user to select that. And actually, if you scroll down into Canvas here, you will actually see visualization of what it should look like before we even run it in Streamlit. And this slider here is this section right here. All right, and it's a little video as well if you're more of a visual person. I did place that in there. Okay. Close it. All right. So now inside of this slider here, what we're going to do is we're going to just have a quick little message to the user. Oops. There we go. We're going to use this indicate power. And here I'm just going to say set your power level. And this is the first item that they'll see. But on the other side of this, what I'm going to use is 3 different values. So the first thing I'm going to put is minimum underscore value. And you'll notice as soon as I type it in, they pop up with the actual value because this is what we're going to be using within there. This is their default information. So the minimum value, I want it to start at 1. And you can have it start at any value, but I want it to start at 1. Now, the maximum value, though, I want it to go all the way to 100. And then there is a third item. By default, if you would like to, you can have it actually be 50. So you can assign the section whenever it runs that the default value is the slider starts at 50, and then they can move it to wherever they would like. So I name that value, and it has to be named the exact same value equals 50, lowercase v. Now that we have that section there, we're going to move on to the next item, which is the radio button. And this radio button, what we see here is is this section here where we see you have to pick your companion. So those are the little radio buttons that we'll be adding in here. So we're going to just say companion equals st.radio. And inside of this st.radio here, I'm just going to place a unicorn here. And I'm just going to say, pick your travel companion. Then on the other parameter here, the second parameter, we're going to have a list of companions that they can pick. So the first one, I'm going to have a wolf. Then the second one, I'm going to have a dragon. Or no, actually, it's a phoenix. See, this one, I think I just used a regular bird or something. Oh, there it is. And then the third one was a dragon. And then the very last one I have is the unicorn. Unicorn. And I already have that. Good. So now that we have that, though, what is the difference that I'm going to actually show you? We're going to run this really quickly before we add the others, because we do need to add a second parameter here. And when I hover over this, let's see if it'll show all of this. You'll notice that it has horizontal is set to false. And that's what's going to happen is it's going to actually be listed vertically. But I want to set it to true for this specific assignment. However, I do want to show you what that looks like at the present. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it and I'm going to do Streamlit run / activity13.py. And then we see here it's literally all vertical, but I want it to be horizontal. I want it to be in one line. We also see our power starts at 50, but we can move it anywhere we want. The minimum value is 1 and the maximum value is 100. We see our drop down here. We can pick from any of these regions. And we also have our label of the name, our header, and we also have where you can enter in your adventurer's name and our title and our subtitle. So we see that this stuff works, but let's go ahead and change the companion to be horizontal. So as the third parameter after the closing square brackets from your list, you're just going to put a comma, and then you're just going to say horizontal equals, and we're going to say true. We're going to use our Boolean variable and say true. And like I mentioned before when we were going over some of these items and going through functions, this is built-in function that a developer created where they take in Quark's default values. So you'll notice here when we used minimum, maximum value, the variables there are actually what we will be using to assign those values. Those are default values there, but we're updating it to be what we want, 1 to 100 to 50. Even the horizontal, you'll notice it was set to false, and now we're saying, no, we want it to be true. So we're using their default variables here to assign it to be true. So now when I save this and I go back to this section here, or it's over here, and I go ahead and rerun it, it's now changed to be horizontal. So everything is the way that I would like it to be at the present. So now we're going to move on to the next section of this, or the next item, which is to have a quest message here. And so in this case, I'm just going to say, I'm going to use the variable quest message, and I'm going to now use st text input. And the same thing that I used up here where we asked the user for information, but this time I'm just going to say, and I'm going to have a little comment, or see, comment bubble. And I'm going to say, create your quest message. Now, everyone needs a little bit of, motivation sometimes. So, at some point you can just say, hey, I want to win this. So in this case here, I'm just making this be the label, and then the actual input, I just want it to be empty because I don't want to show any example quest message this time. So we're just going to do comma and empty space there. So now that we're done with that specific section and we've used text input, we've used select box, we've used slider, the radio button, now we're going to go ahead and calculate a simple score using the power level that the user picked. Now this one is just using regular Python expression. So we're going to have a variable called score, and we're going to use our variable power. And in this case, I'm just going to have some arbitrary number 10 because I just wanted to multiply the player's power by 10 to give a score. You can put whatever value you want here. I'm just placing 10. It's just some random arbitrary number. It doesn't matter. But as long as I'm using the power that the user gave me to calculate some score. This is our expression, and it's getting stored inside of our score variable here. I hope you're understanding the repeat of information that is being repeated again from the beginning of the semester. Kind of try to remember the naming conventions, like a variable, what is an expression, and we're actually using math's operator here, the multiplication. So now we're going to move on to the next task. So 1B. Since it's still in character creation, we're just going to give the adventure greeting. And this is where that interactive feedback is happening. Now, in this case, similarly to what was done in the first assignment, we're actually going to have our if statement. We're going to say if the user entered in some name, if that returns true, we want to execute whatever code is in here. Now, we're going to use a few Streamlit functions that are already built in, has all of the color extra information that we want, so we don't have to go ahead and create our own color code to make the color green or blue. That's done for us behind the scenes. So here we're going to do st.success, which is a success function which shows green. It shows a green success message box with whatever information we pass in here. So what we want to do is actually use our F string here to format this information. So the first things first, I'm going to just have the star here. Place that in here. And we'll say welcome, comma. And another great thing about Streamlit is it allows you to use Markdown. So here in this case, I'm actually going to use the same placeholder and place a name here. But in front of the placeholder, I'm going to have 2 asterisks. And behind the placeholder, I'm going to have another 2 asterisks to indicate that I want this to be bolden. Right? So I want it to be bold. So I'm going to have that 2 asterisks there. Welcome, whatever the adventurer's name is. Now the next thing is your request begins in the next placeholder region. And again, we're going to have 2 asterisks, another 2 asterisks here for bolding in it. And then on this end here, I'm just going to put some sort of map. So whatever they picked from the drop down for the region will get stored in there. Whatever they typed in for the name will get stored in there. Now, the next thing I want past the success message is I want to write to them some information. I want to show them the companion that they picked. So I'm going to also use my formatting string here. Let's say you travel with your loyal companion, 2 asterisks, open, close, curly braces, 2 asterisks. And we're going to make sure that we have companion placed in our first placeholder. Then we're going to have and your power level is, and again, we'll just place that, lightning bolt there. You don't have to do that. We're going to say asterisk, asterisk, open, close, asterisk, asterisk, and then we'll have power, the variable that we stored that power level in. We're going to place it in the placeholder. Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to do here is we now, inside of this if statement still, we're going to use the quest message that they picked just to motivate them a bit. So here we're going to show them whatever they wrote. So we're going to say if, and we're going to use the variable quest message. So if they actually did place something in there because we did let that be optional, then we will execute some line of code. So in this case, we're going to use st.info, right? So inside of this st.info, this shows our informational message in a more blue message dialog box way. So we're just going to use our F string as well, or our format string here as well. So what we're going to have here is our little comment section, and we're going to say something like, and we're going to make it italics here. So we're going to use just 1 asterisk at the beginning and the end. So inside of here, I'm going to say, your message echoes through the land, colon, and then we're going to have our placeholder outside of the asterisk, and we're going to put our quest message in here. Quest underscore message. But outside of that, I'm just going to put a quick quote around it just to indicate that I want that to also be in quotes when it gets displayed in Streamlit. So now that message is going to get displayed in blue if they actually entered something in. Now, the next thing I want to do is show their progress. So I'm going to use the score that we created, and it's going to be underlined the if statement, and that's only if they entered in name will all of this code get executed. So in this case, I'm going to do st.progress and open close parentheses, and this progress function creates a progress bar. And in this case, we divided the power. We're gonna divide the power by 100 to get a 0 to 1 value here. So in this case, whatever power times 10 is going to get stored into score, and we're just going to divide that by 100, or whatever value however you calculated this, you would want to make sure that it would store that 0 to 1 value. So in this case, for progress, I'm just going to do power divided by 100. In this case, it's just taking whatever the user entered in from 1 to 100 and divide that by 100. So far, we're not using score yet, but we will. All right, so then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have an else statement, because we want, if the user didn't enter in their name, hey, you should probably enter in your name at some point. So we want to prompt the user to look above and to enter in their name. So we're going to do st.info, because sometimes reading people miss things, and that's okay. So we're going to say enter your name above to start your adventure. And just this one seems nice, very softer. Okay. So we have this, and this will get displayed in a blue box to the user. So now that we have this section done, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to check to see what it looks like on this end. So I'm going to rerun it. And I know that I entered my name up there. I entered, and I like the ocean, so we'll go there. And I'm just going to, put this up to like 92, and then I'm going to I got my unicorn, and I'm just going to say, go into the deep to win. I don't know, some little message here. And then you'll see here it says, welcome, Deli. Your quest begins in the ocean. And then it says, your travel with your loyal companion, Unicorn, and your power level is at 92. Now, the message that I have here is an info. It says, your message echoes through the land. And then it shows my message right here. So we see the first task is done. So we're going to move on to the next. Excuse me. All right. So now in the next task here, what we're going to do is we want to actually make a header where we add in like the current, player's profile with the dictionary. And we're going to be using our JSON here. So I'm going to just go ahead and say this is task 2, display your player data as a JSON file. And if you remember when we went through JSON, we associated that to dictionaries. So in this case here, we're gonna make sure that we have our key and our value pair here. So we're gonna create a dictionary, and we're gonna call it player underscore data here. And if you remember how to make a dictionary, it's with that open, close, curly braces in Python here. So now what we're gonna do, and I'm gonna just kind of format it this way. Okay. We're gonna have here our string, our key, which is name, and we're going to associate to our key name the variable name, and we're going to press comma. Then we're going to do region, and we're going to associate that to region, comma. Then we're going to do power, and we're going to associate that to power, comma. And then we're going to do companion, and associate that to our variable, companion. And then score, and this is where we use score, and we're going to associate that to score. And then we're going to finally have our quest message, and we're going to associate that to quest underscore message. And then that should be that there. We're good at this point. This is our dictionary here. So we've created and completed, created a whole new word there, our dictionary. And then now we're going to actually use our subheader to showcase our subheader. And we're going to access that by using st.subheader. This adds a small section title. And in this case here, what we're going to do is just, we'll just have some sort of file. Yeah, we're going to just put that in there, some file thing there, some emoji. And we're just going to place in here and say current player profile, open parentheses, and we're just going to say dictionary, and we'll have use a little arrow to this one, arrow, and then we're going to just say JSON view here. So now we have our subheader. Now the very next step we want to do is we're going to just say st.json, and we're going to have our open close parentheses. This is going to neatly display a dictionary in JSON format for our more easy able to read it, well, a more easily readable information. So since we're using st.json, we need to pass as a parameter that dictionary into this function. So we're going to type in player underscore data here, and we're going to save it. Now let's go ahead and open up this file, and we're going to rerun it. And now below we see all of the information that we entered in. So we know the power is 92. Remember, we times the power by 10 to get our score. And we also have the input that we entered in. So this works perfectly well, and it looks great. And so now we currently have the player's information. So we're going to move on to task 2. Or I mean 3 rather, sorry. All right. So we're going to say task 3, download your adventure as JSON. Now, in this case, if you guys remember when we were using JSON in Python, there were a few different functions that we used to be able to write into a file. And we used that called dump. So we know we're going to use dump in here, but we also need to make sure that we access a downloadable button in Streamlit. And we're also needing to tell Streamlit that it is a JSON file type that we're wanting to download it to. So I'm going to go ahead and guide you through that process here. So in this case here, I'm just going to store this value into a variable here. So the very next thing that we're actually going to do is we're going to use JSON dumps. And like I mentioned earlier, what that JSON dumps does is it actually just, it just takes our Python JSON dictionary and it becomes a string in JSON format. So because of that, I'm just going to name this variable on this end, JSON, let's do underscore because that's the better way. JSON str, meaning JSON string. And now we're going to actually access, pardon, our JSON function here, .dumps. So we're going to use dumps this time as opposed to dump. And open close parentheses, and we're going to put as the first parameter the player data that we want, right? And then the next parameter we're going to place in that we want it to be indented at least 4 spaces. And that 4 is just for readability. So it just, instead of it being one line of JSON code, it just allows for each one to have its own line and have space between it. So we're just going to do indent equals 4 here. All right. So now the next thing we're actually going to do is we want to actually check to see if the user actually typed in their name. Then we're going to actually take that information and we're going to pretty much convert it into a string that we can display with our canvas. So the first things first that we're going to do is we're going to have our Boolean, our if logic here. We're going to say if name colon. And then here we're going to use that st.download. And that st.download button is actually what we're going to use to create a clickable downloadable link. So like I mentioned earlier when we were reading and writing through JSON files, we're using json.dumps here because it's going to convert our dictionary into a JSON string. We formatted it so that it's indented 4 spaces, and then we return that to our variable JSON string. We're checking to see if the user entered in any data in terms of their name. So now we're going to use that st.downloadable and just be st.downloadable button. And we're going to do open close parentheses. Now inside of this, what we're going to have is the first thing is going to be a label. Again, this is their default variable. You want to name it the same. And here we're just going to have, I think I'm going to put save here. And no, I think it's a disk. There we go, disk. And we're going to click on that emoji there. And then I'm going to say download adventure data, open close parentheses, and do JSON there. And then I'm going to do comma and enter on a new line here. Now, this new line, we're going to assign to data that string that we created, the variable that we just created up here. So we're going to assign that to data. That's the data we want to download. And then the next thing we're going to do is file name. And we're actually just going to use our F string to create the file name, which is kind of cool, but this is what happens behind the scenes. So we're going to use whatever name the user entered into their variable name there. That's like earlier on in the code, they entered in name. That's the name that we're going to use to save the file. And then we're going to have behind that underscore adventure, and we're going to use extension.json. So that is what the file name is going to get saved as. So you see, some of the purpose of even format stringing even allows you to write a file name in this format. Now, the next thing we're going to do is type in mime. And what the mime is, and assigning it, we're just telling Streamlit it's a JSON file type. And so what that pretty much is saying is that the mime type that tells the browser what kind of file this is. So why mime? We're just telling the browser, hey, this file is a JSON file. And on this end, what we're going to do is just say application/JSON. And we're going to place a T here. And so what this pretty much just says is that this is a JSON file. Instead of it trying to display it as a text, the browser should download it correctly. The operating system is going to know that it is a JSON and it can open it appropriately in that specific app there. So, oops, didn't want to put T there. So that is actually what we want to assign there. Hey, this is a JSON file, open it as such. So now that we're done here with this section here, and you can always refer back to this video if you have any issues or even this code that you've created. Now we're going to move on to task 4 here. Or no, we're not finished. We're not finished because we have an if statement. That's if they write it. We need to have an else statement to let them know, hey, you need to go upstairs and enter in your name again. So we're going to just say else : st.info. And remember that information box is going to make it blue. So inside of here, we're just going to say enter your name. This is like the third prompt we've said to make sure you read up above, but that's okay. Then we're going to say to unlock the download button. So they need to enter in their name. They need to follow the instructions that you place there for them to access the rest of the code, or for them to even access the download button. Now we're done with task 3. We're going to save it and we're going to check to make sure that it works, and then we're going to move on to the other task here. So we're going to rerun this, and we now see all of that for just this button. So we see the save image, we see our information here, and when we click on that download button, what do we get? We get our JSON file, and the name is the name of the user _adventure JSON. And guess what? We have the image of the unicorn here, the score, all this information, and it's all stored inside of Delhi _adventure.json, or whatever the user entered in name _adventure JSON. So now you have that file there, and you created this file. You did this. That's awesome. Let's move in to the next task now. So that's going to be task, where are we at? 4. Now this is just going to be loading your saved adventure. Now in this case here, now we have to use their file uploader. So we want to have a variable to be able to like accept that file. So we're going to say upload file, or uploaded file. And here what we're going to use is st.file uploader. That's the function where we can actually upload that file. But we're going to prompt to the user, upload your saved JSON file. And then as the second parameter, because this is our label, we're going to type in here the type. And again, this is their default value here. Quarks should be in here somewhere. There we go. I know it felt like a lot when I introduced it, but I'm hoping you can kind of see the understanding of it. Now you kind of get the gist of what quarks and args is. These are default variables that they have. So we're going to say the type is, and we're going to have open, close, square brackets here. And we're going to say inside of here that the type is JSON. This is what we're looking for, that JSON file. Now we're done with this line, but we need to make sure to check to see if the file is there, like we've done in the past with file reading write, but this time we're going to use a few really cool functions. So we already used the file uploader, which allows our player to upload a file from their computer, but we only are specifying that we want to get that JSON file. Now we need to check to see if the file is actually there. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, oops, if, and we're going to use our variable uploaded file is not none, meaning it doesn't return that there is no file. So if the user uploaded a CSV or no file at all, then it won't execute this line. We're saying is not none, meaning it didn't get returned, none was not stored in there. So basically, if there is a file, is essentially what that line is. and we're going to say loaded data. So we're going to assign that to that variable, and we're going to say json.load. So we've seen this before. We know that this is going to load that information. And so what we're going to pass in here is the uploaded file variable that stores it if there is a file. So we're basically saying if there's a file, we're going to load that file and return it into the variable loaded data. And what that json.load does, it reads the JSON data from the uploaded file. And then what we're going to do is we want to write our success message. And gratefully, they've already added in there some cool colors, so we don't have to worry about that. So we're going to just say a quick successful message, adventure, data, loaded successfully, exclamation point. Now, at this point, we have this function here. So now let's do st.write. And we're going to write there using our f string. And we're going to make sure it's bold here. So we're going to say asterisk, asterisk, player name, colon, asterisk, asterisk. And then on this end here, we're going to have our open, close, curly braces as a placeholder. And we're going to put loaded underscore data. But since this is a dictionary and we're loading it as a JSON dictionary, how do we access the name of the player? We can access it because if we look at our dictionary, we have our key as a name. So we have to access it using our key here. That's what we're going to do here. So inside of this loaded data, we're going to have our quotes, and we're going to say the exact same thing we typed in here, name. If this is uppercase N, you're going to type in uppercase N below. If it's a lowercase n, you're going to type in lowercase n below. It has to be the same name of the key. So here I have it as lowercase n, so it's going to be a lowercase n name here. Now we're saying load that player's name. So you see how all the information that you're learning over time is getting useful as you're creating your own app. This is how you access the value that the user even added up at the top by using your dictionary. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we want to actually show the progress. So we're going to do st.progress, open, close, first you got to spell it right, open, close parentheses. And then inside of this parentheses here, we're just going to do loaded data. And again, I want to access the power. And on top of that, I want to divide it by 100 so that I get my proper information. So when we look here at the power, this should be, I believe, 92, if that's the right thing. I don't remember what was the output on the other end, but we're dividing it by 100 here. So that's going to be what shows up in our progress, and we're using our JSON data to access the power by the key to divide the value that's stored in power by 100. Now, in this next step here, what we're actually going to do is, since it's successfully loaded and we're going to make sure that the file was loaded, we want to showcase some fun thing here. So I'm going to use st.balloon, which is a cool feature in Streamlit that pretty much shows balloon popping on your screen. Now we're done with the if section. We're going to move on to the else section because, again, maybe they didn't upload the JSON file earlier. So we're going to just do st.info to create that blue dialog box. And we're going to say a little light bulb. Tip. Upload a JSON file you downloaded earlier to reload your adventure. Spell that right. Yes, there we go. So the balloon releases that fun Streamlit, balloon aspect. We know that we've used our caption. Oh, wait, no. I actually don't want info here. This is supposed to be caption. My apologies. That's the same in Streamlit here. But the caption is just going to add that small tip or footnote underneath this section so that they can actually see it. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. So again, in the else statement, it should be st.caption, not st.info. That was my mistake. Okay, so now I'm going to open up our Streamlit application, rerun it. And here we see, okay, we have our downloadable stuff. Let's go ahead and browse. Well, first, let's see where this is. Okay, so I'm going to copy the path of where this is. And then I'm going to browse. And then I'm going to paste my path up here. On my computer, it's just stored in a different location. And then I'm going to click open. And boom, we got our balloon because it was successfully uploaded. And we see our actual percentage of 92% there. And we got our balloon. So everything there worked well. And we got our success message. Let's try to upload something not our balloon. So I'm going to go to desktop and actually let's just download. I'm sure I have something odd in there. Oh, download. I might have some interesting things in. Nope. There's somebody. Oh. Okay, let's go all the way to the bottom and just click on. Jeez, okay. Let's go into here then. Oh, I forgot. I'm not on campus. Alright, I'm going to just randomly pick something in my folder here. Yeah, let's randomly pick a screenshot maybe. Move it. You'll see, okay, all files, and click on this. Open. And it says here there is an error, so we can't run that. And then look, at the very bottom, we see our caption. Upload a JSON file you downloaded earlier to reload your adventure. But if you notice, when I actually clicked on this, it automatically says Adobe Effect JSON. And that's just because of what we did with that little mime thing. All right. So now that we have that there, so we get to JSON, open, successful, good, move on. Now we're going to move on to the next thing. Okay, so we're moving on to task 5. Yes, okay. So I'm going to click on this, and task 5 is to start your quest. So here in this case, what we're saying is if the st button creates a clickable button, so we're saying if st.button here, and inside of here we're going to say begin adventure. So what's going to happen is if they click on that button to begin their adventure, and we need to have our colon for the syntax here, now we're going to say if they did enter the name, And inside of here, we're going to say, we're going to use our with statement here. We're going to say with st.spinner. And this st.spinner here is going to show a loading animation while we're performing a task. Now, this is where we're going to be using time as well. So we have if st.spinner, which is a Streamlit function. We're saying preparing your quest world, dot, dot, dot. And we're going to have a colon there. So it's going to open that up. And remember when I said that with will automatically have a closing thing, so we're using with. We're going to say time. We're going to access that time module that we imported at the top. And we're going to access the sleep function here. And we're going to say, hey, maybe you should sleep for like 2 seconds. So it pauses the code to simulate some form of loading here. So now that we have this, we're going to go underneath that with, and we're going to have our success message here. So we're going to say S quest started, and we're going to have our open close curly braces here, and we're going to say name, and then our exclamation point, and then on the outside of here, we're going to have companion, and then here we're going to have join you in the open close curly braces region. And then we're going to have our dot here. So we're going to say quest started, have your name, your companion join you in the region. That just should be joins. Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to do is just another balloon effect. And if you find that there are other effects that you like, you can choose to do that as well. So we have that balloon effect. And then lastly, because we're using if name to inquire if the user even entered the name, the next thing, since we've had so many times prior where we've asked the user to enter their name, if they accidentally missed reading it, please go up. Now this time, we are going to send them a warning because this is like the third time. So we're going to say st warning, open close parentheses, and that st warning is going to show oddly as a yellow warning box. I originally thought it was going to be red, but here we're going to do please enter your name first before starting your quest. Hopefully this helps the user read above and actually start from the beginning and not skip around. So here we have all of this statement here, and now they're able to start their quest. So before we move on to the very last task of their reflection and their next step, we're going to save this. And let's make sure I hit everything. Now we're going to move on to see what it looks like. So we're going to test out that section here. So now we're going to say begin adventure. Since we did type in the name, it did go ahead and load it. We had a 2-second delay, and then it said quest started, Delhi unicorn joins you in the ocean. Because remember, we picked the ocean earlier up. So now, lastly, we're going to go ahead and finish off with task 6 here. Okay, task 6, we're going to have reflection and next steps. So now inside of here, what we're actually going to be using is something called st.markdown. Now this is what I said earlier when I said, oh, they allow you to have markdown when you want to capitalize the name, bolden the name or the region. But in this case, we can actually access their markdown function, and we're actually going to place in here some markdown information. So I'm going to use our doc strings, which is the 3 quotes, and we're just going to have a simple success message here. We'll say asterisk, asterisk, you have successfully, colon, asterisk, asterisk. And then here I'm just going to say 1, created a Streamlit app with interactive widgets. And then number 2, displayed user data in JSON format. And this is for you. And then number 3, download and upload JSON files, and please do this. Number 4, added interactive feedback like progress bar, messages, and balloons. Let's put a balloon in there. Okay. And then we'll close out of that, and the very last thing we're going to add in here is that st.success message. And we're going to just say congratulations. Adventurer, you've completed all Streamlit adventure tasks. All right. So, let's spell that right again. Struggle bus. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and go to class activity 13, or the actual Streamlit, and we're going to run it. And now we've seen all that we have completed here. This is everything that you've done today in this activity. Great job, you've ended, and we're done. So this is what you should have at the very end of your class activity 13, or at the very end of creating this. You learn to use Streamlit widgets to collect and display data interactively. You converted and saved information with JSON. You downloaded and reloaded saved player profiles. And you've also add interactivity and animation and visual feedback to Python apps. So the next time around, we'll look into other aspects, and you could actually add in more things. So for example, if you're actually trying to work on your project at the present, you could add features such as background color, score levels, or even a leaderboard by using, what is it called? SC Streamlit _ state, which is another built-in function. And we'll get to those things over the next few weeks. So we'll just be adding in a lot of different Streamlit methods to help you out with your project. So I hope that this video helped explain things a little bit more in detail, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.